I'm delighted to welcome you here this evening to the very first FameLab final in Ireland. The objective of FameLab is to encourage and assist scientists to communicate their passion for science to a wider public. I'm sure that you'll see some of that passion tonight, and I can say that with confidence, having had the privilege to witness the finalists honing their skills at a workshop we helped to organise just a couple of weeks ago in Dublin. I'm equally sure that you will learn something new, and I hope you will have your interest in science awakened, or more likely reawakened or extended in some way. I'm personally delighted to be here to welcome you all to this event, because 7 years ago I was part of a small team in the British Council who decided to create an international version of FameLab by taking the event which had been developed by Cheltenham Science Festival and running it in 9 countries in Southeast Europe. International FameLab now happens in more than 20 countries around the world. The winner of tonight's final will be going to the Cheltenham Science Festival in June to compete against 20 others who have won national competitions in all those countries around the world, from South Africa, Hong Kong, Egypt, as well as a number of other European countries. I'd like to thank our partner, News Talk, who've helped us in bringing FameLab to Ireland. Through their programme Future Proof, we have certainly been able to reach a huge audience for FameLab and reach parts of Ireland that we certainly couldn't have reached on our own. We're also grateful to CPL, who have helped us organise and manage this event and the process leading up to it, and to Science Gallery for hosting the final here this evening. I'd also like to give my thanks to the panel of judges who will be introduced to you very soon, to all the participants who've had the courage and initiative to enter the competition, to Malcolm Love, who ran the masterclasses a couple of weeks ago, to Cheltenham Science Festival for coming up with this brilliant idea in the first place, and to my colleagues in the British Council, especially Liz McBain, who's worked extremely hard over the past few months to bring us this far. My final task this evening is to introduce Jonathan McRae, who will be the Master of Ceremonies this evening. Jonathan is an award-winning broadcaster and journalist from Dublin. He currently presents Future Proof on News Talk 106 to 108, the award-winning weekly science programme that covers everything from robotics in war to spider goats to the Big Bang, and even an interview with last year's International FameLab winner a couple of months ago. He's written on science and technology for the Irish Independent, for Silicon Republic, and other outlets. Last year, Jonathan presented the Science Squad for RTE1, looking at cutting-edge science in Ireland. He's also the resident technology expert for George Hook on the Right Hook on News Talk 106 to 108. Jonathan also presents The Spin on Spin 1038. So now over to Jonathan for what promises to be a fascinating, inspiring, and enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Michael. I like the way he said award-winning twice. As Michael said, I'm Jonathan McRae. I present a science programme called Future Proof on News Talk 106 to 108, and we are delighted to be partnering FameLab, British Council, for bringing FameLab here for the very first time. It's a pretty big deal. This is a competition that's taking place in 24 different countries, and it will end in the culmination of a final in the Cheltenham Science Festival, which is one of the big and most prestigious science festivals in the world. So what is FameLab? Well, it's an initiative to try and get people working in science and engineering to communicate their ideas and their passion for their subjects to the outside world. It's a great opportunity for people taking part in the project because they get to go on to great things. Many winners of the FameLab finals have been had riches kind of fall at their feet, but also it's a great opportunity for the organizations who can nurture these sort of science communicators and bring them on in their communication skills so they can talk about their work with the public, which is a huge deal right now because we all know what sort of a stretch there is on the economy. Scientists now need to be able to explain why it is they do what they do and why we should fund their research. So FameLab is a 3-minute presentation. These contestants you're going to see here tonight, 10 finalists, were very brave to first submit a video entry, and then they were whittled down to 10, and they took part in a science communication workshop with a brilliant science communication trainer by the name of Malcolm Love. He sort of honed their skills, and we're going to see them up here on stage tonight in a few minutes' time. They're going to do a 3-minute presentation, and their presentation could be on any scientific, engineering topic, mathematics, but they're going to be based on 3 essential concepts, and these concepts are going to be judged on by our 3 judges who I'll introduce in a minute. They are content, the idea, clarity, how clearly they express what they're talking about, and charisma, that all-important X factor, which is what FameLab is all about. There's no PowerPoint, there's no slides, it's just them on stage. So it's a pretty big deal and a very difficult task to communicate any scientific topic in such a short space of time. After the 3 minutes, the judges will ask them questions and have their own comments. And then once we've heard all the presentations, the judges will retire. We have a great comedian who's going to be performing for the interval mat over there. And then we're going to call the judges back. We're going to have the vote from the audience, so everyone should have a sheet in front of them. You get to choose your winner. We'll be awarding the prizes then for the audience vote, and then the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st place in that order. I'd ask you to turn off your phones, or at least turn them on silent. If you'd like to tweet, the hashtag is FameLab, and we do encourage you, if you want to live tweet the event, we'd be very happy that you do so. But please make sure your phone is on silent, because 3 minutes is a short time. To be interrupted would be a bit of a bummer, to say the least. Okay, so I think that's everything. So let's meet the judges. Brian Trench is a researcher and trainer in science communication. He used to be head of communications in DCU, my old alma mater. He's now a visiting lecturer at CISA in Trieste. He's a co-author of the Routledge Handbook of Public Communication of Science and Technology, and he's also a member of the program committee for the upcoming 2014 International Conference on Public Communications in Salvador, Brazil, which sounds like a nice gig. Please put your hands together for Brian Trench. Our next judge is Judith Moffat. She is the manager of the Science, Engineering and Supply Chain Division of CPL, which is the technical recruitment division of CPL. She herself has a degree in both biology and chemistry from DCU, went on to do a Master of Science in Science Communication in DCU, and is also actively working in the science communication field. She's very passionate about it. She's on the committee member for the Alchemists Cafe, which is a Dublin cafe sort of inviting the science in an informal, the Irish public to get involved in science in a very informal setting. Very successful last year during ESOF. Judith Moffat, please put your hands together for our next judge. And finally, Professor Luke O'Neill was appointed to the chair of biochemistry at Trinity College, Dublin in 2008, where he leads the Inflammation Research Group. He is also academic director of the Trinity Biomedical Sciences Institute. He's won numerous awards for his research, notably the Royal Irish Academy Medal for Biochemistry, the Irish Society for Immunology Medal, the Royal Dublin Society Irish Times Boyle Medal for Scientific Excellence, and the Science Foundation Ireland Researcher of the Year Award in 2009. He's a co-founder and director of Opsona Therapeutics. He's published over 220 papers. He is also sitting on the panels of Nature, Science, Cell, Nature, Immunology, and Nature Medicine. He also can chop down mountains with the side of his hand. It's Professor Luke O'Neill. Okay, I think it's about time to start. As I say, please make sure your phones are off, and I give all of our contestants a really big round of applause, because it is very difficult to come up here on stage, and not least of all for the first person to come up on stage, who for the entire evening I've been calling Steve. His name actually is Gavin Kenny. He is currently studying a meteorite impact crater in Ontario, Canada, in pursuit of his PhD in geology. He completed his degree in 2001 before working as a mineral exploration geologist for a year, which sounds pretty cool. He loves the outdoors and teaching and the earth. He also loves explaining ideas to people, which is why he's here. You can have a look at his Earth Science blog, which is on the rocks, geoblog.wordpress.com, which aims to communicate his feelings on science to the outer public. Welcome to the stage, Gavin. Good luck.
Was the Earth that we recognize and think we know so well today once completely encased in ice? Some geologists believe that 700 million years ago, the Earth was just like this, like one of Jupiter's moons, Europa, is today. So, with modern climate change, it's more important than ever that we understand what are the natural fluctuations and the natural extremes that Earth's climate has been to in the past. For example, for most of Earth's history, the globe hasn't had any ice on it at all. And when it has, it's usually just on the South Pole. But today, and for about the last 2 million years, we've had varying amounts of ice on both the North and South Poles. Now, as an ice sheet grows, as we can see here over the north of Europe, it's clearly very white and very reflective. Therefore, as the sun's energy is coming in, more and more of it is going to be reflected away. And this is going to allow the globe to cool further and the ice sheets themselves to expand even more. Now, clearly, this can become a self-perpetuating cycle. The ice sheet expands, the Earth's reflectiveness, or albedo as it's known, increases, and therefore the Earth gets cooler, allowing the ice to expand even more. Now, if we get to a tipping point, which is thought to be at about 30 degrees from the equator, the Earth is by this stage so reflective and so cool that we could then plunge into an extreme icehouse world known as Snowball Earth. Now, in order to try and work out, well, how could we possibly get out of this? This was always the problem for geologists. Clearly we can plunge into this, but now that the Earth is so reflective, how could we ever get out? So in order to try and solve this problem, we can start by thinking, well, how are we melting the ice caps today? So if we think today, we've got our cars and cities pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and our intensive yet flatulent agriculture pumping methane into the atmosphere, these gases are creating a thermal blanket around the Earth, which as the sun's energy comes in, it can't escape. Therefore, the Earth heats up, and the ice caps melt faster. But if we think 700 million years ago, I don't think these processes were going on. So how could we have melted the ice and saved the Earth? Well, this is where volcanic eruptions come in. So although the globe was completely encased in ice, volcanoes beneath would have kept erupting. And these, although it would have taken a lot longer than the modern processes we have today, as they spewed out lava and ash, they're also pumping gases into the atmosphere. And as these gases built up in the atmosphere, again, the Earth wouldn't be so reflective, but it would start to trap the sun's heat and energy, like the gases we're doing today. And eventually, the ice would begin to crack and break apart, and the Earth would be freed of this ice that's encasing it. So, while Snowball Earth remains a controversial issue, it's clear it's actually a self-reversing process, and the Earth can free itself. Thank you very much.
Well done, Gavin. So, to our judges. Luke?
Very good, Gavin. Enjoyed that. Did you make those props yourself?
I did indeed, and my supervisor wouldn't be too happy that I spent so long on it.
That was very good. Yeah, I like the way you set up a problem and then you tried to answer it with the I never knew about volcanoes. That was very interesting, that they may be a reason, I guess, why the Snowball Earth isn't a reality, I guess. One interesting thing, in your sort of bit of text here, you say you treasure the moment a face lights up an understanding.
Yeah.
Now,
That's cheesy.
How do you achieve that? What's the secret there, do you think? To get someone's face to light up in understanding, because I try that and fail.
Well, I think, it's tough. It's really tough, but I think when you're trying to explain, for example, to an undergrad geologist, first-year geologist, trying to explain a concept to them, you got to try and think, well, what was I thinking when I did it? And that's the best way. Like, you got to just imagine, like, where you started. What were you thinking? I was thinking, oh, what is a rock anyway? But whereas the lectures start, well, this rock formed here and there. But you're just like, what is it? Like, what's it made of? Is it, is it carbon? Is it oxygen? So you just got to think back to where you were, because we all started, not being able to speak. So if you're able to just remember where you were, I think that's the secret.
Yeah, and I guess enthusiasm seems to be key. You come across as a very enthusiastic
Yeah, why not?
purveyor. And would you be equally enthusiastic outside your area of expertise, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I just really enjoy science, just learning different things. I can just listen to people, and I just really enjoyed the weekend we had. We had with the guys, with 15 of us before we got whittled down to 10. It was just learned so much and met some great people, and it was fantastic.
Right. Yeah. And you managed to do it without any PowerPoint slides.
They're boring.
I think that's right. Yes, we're all dogged by PowerPoint.
Yeah,
aren't we? Was it especially difficult, do you think? And then you have your props, of course, so that makes.
I don't know. I think it'd be more difficult to try and put PowerPoints up trying to explain something. I'd rather just. Okay, this is how it happens, rather than trying to explain with some diagram or something stupid, Sure. So it's easier this way.
Easier that way.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so, thanks.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Well done. Okay, number 2 is Trina O'Connell, originally from Cork. Trina studied biomedical science in the Cork and Dublin Institutes of Technology. She then went on to get a Master of Science from Dublin City University and even managed to hang around to get a PhD. Her main research looks at the sugars that coat the surface of human cells, which sounds yummy. In her spare time, she's an avid baker and knitting fanatic, so her talk should have you in stitches. Trina O'Connell, everyone.
Now, cool. I'm going to talk to you about 2 of my favourite things, food and science, for fairly obvious reasons. Now, I'm going to talk to you about mayonnaise. So, mayonnaise is made with oil and water. Well, it's not technically water, it's vinegar or lemon juice. But we know these things don't normally mix, and the key ingredient in mayonnaise is eggs. So there must be something in eggs that allows us to mix oil and water, and there is. This molecule called lecithin. So the molecule lecithin is a very interesting molecule. It's got 2 parts to it. There's a head group, so it's a little head, and it's got a long tail at the end. Now, this head is attracted to water, so that's fine. We have a water-loving end, hydrophilic. And we have a long tail at the other end that's attracted to fats, oils. It's lipid-loving. It's hydrophobic. It doesn't like water. So it's obviously, quite directional. Now, when you're making mayonnaise, have you ever made mayonnaise at home? It's messy, you've mixed your water, you've mixed your egg yolk, you're beating in the oil, you're beating and beating and beating, beating, and then suddenly mayonnaise starts to happen. It's magical. Try it out sometime. But what's happening is that you're forming really, really tiny oil droplets, and these tiny oil droplets are getting coated by the lecithin. There's loads of lecithin in egg yolk. It's about 10% of an egg yolk. And so, as you can imagine, the tails will be embedding within these oil droplets, and these little heads will be facing out to the water, thereby shielding the oil from the water and allowing it to kind of float there in suspension. Now, some of you are sitting there kind of going, I know the word lecithin. Where do I know it from? Well, you've read the back of a bar of chocolate. So you're kind of going, oh, she's gone from mayonnaise into chocolate, lads. But if you look at the back of a bar of chocolate, it says soya lecithin. Now, if you consider what chocolate is made from, it's made from sugar and cocoa, which are things that usually dissolve really well in water. It's made from cocoa butter, which is something that does not dissolve really well in water. It's an oil. And lecithin allows you to mix these 2 things together. So that's okay. Where are we going with this? Well, we're going back to mayonnaise. So my hero, Hervé Thies, if you've never heard him, look him up. He is the father of molecular gastronomy. Heston Blumenthal is nothing in comparison to this man. And he said, right, we have something that contains fats and emulsifiers, lecithin, and why can't we add water to it? Because normally, if any of you have ever melted chocolate at home, you find if there's any bit of water gets into it, it seizes, it goes all lumpy and it's hard and you can't spread it and it doesn't look very good, but you'll still eat it. But you can actually mix water and chocolate, right? So this is going to sound counterintuitive, and I encourage you to go home and look up the exact volumes and do it. You melt water and chocolate, and that's fine. And you're kind of sitting there going, okay, so I have really wet chocolate. You can use orange juice if you want to be really fancy. And then you cool it down and you beat it. And as you beat it, you're mixing the lecithin around and you're forming smaller and smaller cocoa droplets, or cocoa butter droplets. And actually, as time goes, it's like when you make mayonnaise. You start out with something really runny and suddenly you have sauce. And it really does work like that. So I really do encourage you to go home into your kitchens and experiment and make chocolate mayonnaise. Science.
Very good, Trina. Okay, over to our judges.
Well done, Trina.
Thank
That was
you.
very interesting, I have to say, and very engaging, and quite a challenge to do it in 3 minutes. So a really, really good talk. What I'm curious about is I love the idea of bringing science into everyday life, and you've really done that there. What's your view on, people think that someone who's a really good cook is like a scientist. Would you agree with that?
I kind of would, because there's a lot of experimentation. Like, if you're willing to take steps and go creative and kind of go, okay, I'm going to change this because I understand something. And that's kind of what scientists do. We take something and kind of go, this works. I'm going to change that and see if it continues to work. Or I'm going to change that and, oh my God, it's an absolute disaster. And the cookies fell through the tray and I'm never doing it on a wire rack again. And it's actually really funny. If you go and poll the scientists in the lab, about 2/3 of them, and you say, right, you're going to give up science. You're saying, that's it, science. Dead to me. Yeah, they say to you, I'm going to open a cafe, I'm going to open a restaurant, I'm going to open a cocktail bar. Very few people will try and tell you that they're going to do something different. You should try it sometime next time you have a bunch of scientists, because there's definitely a lot of overlap between the two.
Definitely a correlation there, yeah. Oh, yeah. I can see that. So, fair play. That was brilliant. Really
Thanks.
good.
Well done. Great, so trucking along quite nicely. Number 3 is Joe Roach. Joe studied science in Trinity College Dublin before embarking on a PhD in astrophysics. Over the course of his research, he used the Hubble Space Telescope to observe symbiotic systems, as he calls them, beautiful duets performed by a dead dwarf star orbiting an angry red giant star. Touch of drama there. He likes to pronounce astrophysics as Ask Joe Physics, but it's not catching on. And weirdly, he's taken his jacket off because he's found out that he can't talk with the jacket on. Joe Roach.
I was a hopeless romantic when I was young. You could find me on any given night, sitting at my bedroom window, gazing up at the sky and wishing upon a star. What a curiously human thing to do, to wish upon a star. And if I could somehow step back in time and converse with my boyhood self, I would offer him this sage advice. Oh, foolish younger version of me, a star is merely a ball of gas with two forces in conflicting opposition to each other. Gravity trying to collapse the star under its own weight, battling against the nuclear fusion occurring in its core. And those forces won't always be in balance. So don't pin your hopes and dreams upon a star, because someday that star will find itself crushed and then torn apart, just like your hopes and dreams. As I grew older, I started to think more about how our relationship with the stars has come to change. Some very worried, anxious people often ask me, can the stars really have an impact on our daily lives? And I say yes. But it doesn't matter if you're Sagittarius or Capricorn or any of that other nonsense. The sun, our closest star, provides us with all the heat and light we need for life to take place every day. And in less than 8 billion years' time, the sun will exhaust its supply of hydrogen and will collapse in on itself before becoming a red giant star. And we'll watch from Earth as it grows bigger and brighter in the sky until it eventually engulfs us and devastates our planet. And that too will have an impact on our daily life. But it's not just the end of our world that the stars promise us. They promise us new worlds too. When I first gazed at the stars all those years ago, we knew of only one that had planets around it, our sun. We long suspected other stars of having planets, but it took us until the 1990s until we started to find them. Now we know of 677 stars that have planets around them. And we've gotten so good at detecting these planets, we think the ratio of planets to stars might be as high as 1:1. That means in our galaxy alone, there may be more than 100 billion planets waiting to be discovered. Untouched, pristine new worlds that have never even heard of nuclear weapons or financial systems or Justin Bieber. It's not just during my own lifetime that the role of stars has changed. Long before we knew what they were, mankind worshipped the stars as gods and used them as tools of navigation around the world. Nowadays, we know that almost everything around us came from the stars. The life essential elements, carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, were all formed in the cores of red giant stars. And they've shown us that without stars, we would be nothing. The stars have taught us where and what we came from, and they tell us how everything will end. And when I look at the stars now, I find myself humbled. But I also feel a tiny bit satisfied, because maybe when I was younger, it wasn't so silly to find myself wishing upon a star after all. Thank you.
Very good, Joe. Okay. Judges' comments. Brian.
Joe, well done. Are you still a hopeless romantic?
I am, although I guess I'd call myself a Joe-mantic. It's like...
Try
Make him stop.
again.
So
Okay, you tell us that stars instruct us where we came from, but also how things will end. So how will they end?
well, they won't end great for us. So when the sun...
And roughly when?
7.57 billion years' time, the sun runs out of fuel and swells up to become a red giant star. Now, eventually that'll mean the Earth is engulfed in the giant star as it moves outwards, but really we'll be long gone before then, because before that the sun will blow off our atmosphere, and without an atmosphere we'll end up like Mars. It'll be an unhappy ending for us.
So you're fairly sure of the timescale?
We're pretty sure, yeah. I mean, we can study other stars, and that's the great thing about stars. You can look at them. There's so many different stars at different stages of our lifetime that we've got a pretty good idea how each of them will end.
Stephen Hawking told a great story when he was here in the RDS many years ago, that he said, you know, if the Earth is expanded, then if the universe is expanded, then it will eventually shrink. And he made this comment at a meeting in Japan, and the stock market collapsed. So you're quite sure it's 7.5 something years ago. It's not next week.
It's not next week. No, we have some time.
What's the discovery you'd like to have your name attached to?
That is a good question. I guess I'd like something that we could see. I mean, I love all parts of science, and I love the idea of thinking about atoms and quantum physics, things we can't even see. But I guess I would prefer if I was pushed to have something like a star that we can see every night when we go outside. Maybe that's because I'm an egomaniac or something, but I'd like that idea.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Well done.
Well done, that was great. Okay, Rocco Lupoi is a recently appointed lecturer in Trinity College Dublin within the Department of Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering. He has spent several years as a researcher in Cambridge developing new generation manufacturing processes. His current interests focus on the study of a novel coating method involving micron-sized metal particles travelling at over 3,600 kilometres an hour. Rocco is also a bit of a mixed bag. He's a football and rugby fan, loves skiing, and has a passion for heavy metal music. Welcome to the stage. Put your hands together for Rocco Lupoi. Good luck.
What happens if we get a metal bar, steel for example, and we put it outside in our garden for a relatively long period of time? We all understand it will eventually rust, or to be more precise, we will chemically react with oxygen to form something known as metal oxide. You see, a very similar phenomenon is actually happening to us. The relationship between oxygen and our bodies is something rather incredible. There is certainly enough oxygen in this room for us to breathe, as such is a fundamental component for the energy production in our cells. We need oxygen to stand, as I'm doing now. We need oxygen to sit, as you are right now. We need oxygen to run if you wanted to. We basically need oxygen for everything. We need it, in fact, to survive. However, such is not the full story. Only about 98% of the oxygen we are breathing is, in fact, used to sustain us. What happens then to the remaining 2%? Such surplus can lose electron and mitochondrial level and become something known as superoxide oxygen. It is in fact one of the most dangerous free radicals in our body. It is highly toxic, it is highly dangerous, it will react and destroy cells. Of course, all our bodies know everything about it, and it has developed with time a number of defense mechanisms, as such are known as antioxidants. Vitamin E is a tangible example. However, it's just not possible for each one of us to cope with all forever. And this means that such a highly reactive oxygen, such a type of free radical, is eventually going to win. It is in fact the main responsible for aging. You see, we all understand that most of the living creatures on Earth need oxygen to survive, as such it plays a fundamental role for the evolution of life as we understand it. However, the sad truth is that such a same element, such a same compound, such a same gas which gave us life and made it possible is in fact right now, slowly, as I am talking, killing you. Such as with a rust bar of metal. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rocco. Luke?
Interesting topic. to choose there. What made you pick that as a topic?
I thought it was very interesting, as you just said.
Yes.
It's not,
There are many interesting topics. Yes.
it is not my research area whatsoever, but there are certain topics that they just wow me. This was one of the one that kind of
Right.
when you got to understand it is something incredible. So something they actually make you leave is actually kill you.
Yeah, that's
at
the
same
exciting
time.
thing, isn't it? I mean, you must have chosen it in part because you wanted to shock the audience.
Yeah, we all encourage you not to breathe anymore, but of course you're going to die even sooner than that. So keep
right.
breathing.
And wasn't the emergence of oxygen a big tragedy for life on Earth, wasn't it? Because as soon as oxygen began to rise, there was mass extinctions, wasn't there, I think?
Absolutely.
And then certain things like mitochondria evolved to handle the oxygen, I guess. That's an
Absolutely.
interesting
Well,
concept.
eventually, that's part of life at the end. And in nature, has worked it out that we're going to die at some point at the end. So, better later than sooner, of course. But some others are part of the situation. We cannot avoid it, I think.
Right, so are antioxidants good for you or bad for you?
They're good.
They're
definitely good, yes. They're
Except
definitely
in
good.
cancer, maybe. Because we need oxygen radicals to kill tumour cells, do we? I mean, there's a current theory there that they're bad for us. But you reckon they're good on that?
Typically, antioxidant, well, eventually that cancer is a specific case, but if you are healthy enough, they are good enough. They are definitely good. They will prevent people to look old. And then eventually, this is what you die by aging, and eventually that is the case, really. But of course, if you get a specific situation, that could be a different story.
So keep eating broccoli.
Keep eating broccoli, tomato, full of antioxidants.
Yes.
And buy antioxidant creams. No, I never said that. I never said that. See, the thing is, the people go to shops and buy antioxidant creams. They have no idea what it is. They say, I listen on TV. It must be good.
Yeah.
Antioxidant, great. What do you mean? Antioxidants. That's great. Just buy it. So
are you claiming that they don't work then, Rocco, as anti-aging?
No, it's just people don't understand what they are and just keep buying them. That's it.
That's right.
Exactly.
Luke, stop trying to get them to libel people, please.
That's right.
They definitely work, but the TV kind of make to people the knowledge of why they don't know where they are. That's what it is, and they just.
I suppose lastly, what motivates you to get up here in front of people and give that 3 minutes?
Passion for science communication. So more than anything else, there is something that I feel passionate about. I just want to tell you. That's it.
Right. Thank you, Rocco.
Thank you.
Hey, Rocco. Well done. Okay, number 5 is Sarah Flanagan, and having completed her degree in immunology and research masters in microbiology, Sarah now works as a mediator part-time here in the Science Gallery Dublin. When she's not talking about science with anyone close enough to listen, she's reading about it with a personal interest in quantum physics and how the universe works. As a break from the wonders of the world, Sarah enjoys yoga, acting and writing, and Star Trek, and more science. Earlier she told me she's exploring the space of acting, which I'm sure will delight her parents. She's next up. It's Sarah Flanagan.
So when I was younger, I always wanted to be a superhero. I always wanted to climb up walls and out of buildings, saving people from burning fires, that kind of thing. I wanted to be like Spider-Man, basically. But then I remembered I hate spiders. And I thought, that's a bad idea. So what other examples of a superhero could I use? I thought, what other animals can do the same things that spiders can do? Well, for instance, the most interesting one, in my opinion, is geckos. Now, geckos are amazing creatures. They can run on any surface, at any orientation, whether it's rough or smooth, wet or dry, clean or dirty. And they can do it at amazing speeds. And that's all due to their fantastic feet. If you zoom in closely on their fantastic feet, on each of their toes, you'll find a million hair-like fibers called setae. And these hair-like fibers are maybe 30 times smaller than a human hair. And what makes them so fantastic is that if you zoom in on those hair-like fibers, you'll find 1,000 more split ends on them. In fact, there's per millimeter squared on a gecko's toe, there's 14,000 hair-like fibers, each with their own split end on them. And it's these split ends that actually perform the main interesting fact of how they stick to surfaces. Right down to the atomic level, the atoms that line the split ends are forming weak atomic bonds with the atoms that line the surfaces they want to stick to. These forces are so weak that you need a large surface area to do it, but it works pretty well. And we know that because The foot pads of a 70-gram mature gecko, it's about maybe that big, can support the weight of 290 pounds. To put that into perspective, that's twice my weight, or my weight plus the one person I'll carry out of the burning building on my back. I'm just saying. Research has been done into geckos' feet for other reasons, to be able to create gloves and boots that can climb walls in the International Space Station, or for glueless adhesives. And it's working pretty well, because the only surface that geckos actually have trouble but still can stick to is Teflon, due to its low surface density. So basically, I've changed my mind about being Spider-Man. I don't want to do that anymore. From now on, I want to be Gecko Girl.
Well done, Sarah. That was great. Judith.
Yeah, Sarah, well done. I didn't know where this was going to go, to be honest. I saw the superhero coming up and I was like, fantastic. Which it was like, which one's it going to be? And then we went to geckos, and then we went back to superheroes. So very well put together and very innovative, I have to say. First question for you. I'm an avid film follower. I love the movies, and I'm very interested in how science is portrayed in cinema. What would be your favourite film and that would have science in it? And can you maybe just talk about the portrayal of it in it?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I remember growing up and actually liking the film Gattaca, because I think it's quite interesting in terms of politics as well. The basis of the film is that you can take any piece, like maybe a hair of a certain person, and get their entire genome sequenced and find out their prevalence for certain diseases, or short-sightedness and things like that, and that can actually influence the jobs that you're capable of getting when you're older. I thought it was an interesting, controversial topic to have in a film, and the entire film is based around it. I don't agree with it, obviously, but I thought it was an interesting concept to portray in a film.
And how did you find speaking up here today, unaided, 3-minute slot? How did you prepare?
Terrifying.
Terrifying. Okay.
Well, as Jonathan said, I'm trying to do some acting at the moment. I suppose just being comfortable in this space was what Malcolm Love taught us over the workshop. So I tried to emulate a bit of his wonderful enthusiasm and just try and be myself up here, and I hope that came across. So.
Okay. Yeah. And the last thing I was going to say to you is, the gecko image is fantastic, and the way you linked it in with Spider-Man. Are you a big fan of natural history and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I just find them really interesting animals, actually. But yeah.
Why? Was there any particular reason before that, like even with the link to Spider-Man, was there anything in particular that
well, I chose them because I think it's fantastic that you can take an animal that you can obviously see with your own eyes. It's reasonably big, and it has so much more going on to it on a molecular, even atomic level, that we don't understand until you look closer. The transfer from macro to micro to atomic is really interesting, and that's what I thought would be an interesting thing to talk about.
Excellent. Well, you've linked a lot of them there today, so well done. Thanks.
Thank you.
That was great, Sarah. Well done. Look, I can't not mention the show we're doing for Science Gallery for the Risk exhibition, because it's such a perfect segue with what Sarah was talking about. So I think it's the 19th of June. I got my genome sequenced by a company called 23andMe, and we're going to be announcing the results of that live here. And I'm going to be finding out my own personal problems, my likelihood of getting certain cancers and that sort of stuff. I'm going to be finding it live here on this stage, because it's an interesting kind of look into what sort of information is becoming available to us. So check out sciencegallery.com for that. Sorry about the plug, but it's just such a perfect segue. Right, moving on. Shane is a nanoscientist. Shane Bergen works with a really tiny microscope. No, that's a joke. He started as a physics lecturer in Trinity College Dublin in October 2012. When he isn't in the lab, Shane is busy teaching masses of undergraduate students on topics as diverse as smashing wine glasses with sound. Want to check that out. And also why we get so cold when we get out of a hot shower. Also another question I want answered. He's also working on a project called Dart of Physics, which will put physics ideas on the sides of trains. It's a really cool idea. So like on the side of a train, you'll see, take the dart to work, arrive younger than if you walked. Which will no doubt confuse the poor dears getting the train home from bingo in Bray. But interesting to hear what he has to say. Shane Bergen.
I want you to think, what drives the next big thing in technology? I'm talking about revolutions, not just evolutions. What allows us to make massive quantum leaps in our know-how? Is it money? Is it jobs? They're end effects, but I say no. I say the seed is curiosity. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but it is the keystone to science. And it is what drives me and perhaps most of my scientific colleagues here. It's what gets us up in the morning. It's what gets us into the lab, spending lots of time on my tiny microscope, trying to figure out something. Curiosity. And actually, when I think about it, nearly all of the massive leaps forward that are so many of them that I can think of in science have stemmed from somebody thinking, that musing, that afterthought experiment, that recovered petri dish from the bin, that I wonder what if, why is the sky blue, why are you younger when you take the dart to work as opposed to if you walked? It's curiosity. And I want to give you an example of something that you've all heard about, but perhaps you haven't thought about how somebody's curiosity has led to development, and that's the Doppler effect. It's the reason why you hear a change in pitch of an ambulance when it whizzes past you on the road. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to take a very annoying sound source. Wait for it. It's not that loud, actually. It's louder in my office. So you'll notice that it has a very high frequency. That means its pitch is very high. In fact, wave pulses are moving towards you 3,000 times per second. That's its frequency. And then the waves themselves are pulsing out into the room in every direction at the speed of sound. But I say again, it's pulsing 3,000 times a second. But what happens if I move it? All right. Try not to smack myself in the face like I did earlier. Well, what happens is that when the source is moving towards you, those wave pulses are bunching up together, so that when they reach your ear, you're hearing them at a higher frequency. More of them are getting there in any given time. So you hear that as a higher pitch. And equally, when it's moving away from you, the pulses are spread apart, so you hear that as a lower pitch, or a lower note, as we'd say. So, great. What's that good for? Well, that's how a guard is able to determine how fast you're going. Why? Because if you know the original pitch and you know the change in pitch, then you can tell how fast it's going. And that's really important. Biologists use it to see how our heart works with blood flow going through it. Astronomers like Joe would use it to determine whether galaxies are moving away or towards us in the heavens. And it's a perfect example of how a curiosity-driven experiment can lead to massive developments. If technology is like an orchestra with amazing ability, then scientists are the people behind the design of the instruments. And they might know the next big symphony that they're going to produce, but would you deny them the chance to make a new violin or a clarinet? No. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. I have to put my hand up and say I thought the sound of an ambulance changed. When I didn't realise that was just the way we listened to it. I thought it actually changed. Obviously, it's constant sound. And no one else thought that. Nobody else thought that. No, I thought it went woo, woo. I thought that was the noise. It would kind of make you go, oh, what the hell is that?
Do you think the HSE has that amount of money?
Brian.
Actually, for Jonathan's benefit, how do you tell students how to smash wine glasses with sound, apart from singing very high?
Well, that's the basis of the experiment. You get a sound source that matches what's called the natural frequency of the glass. So you know when you run your finger around the rim of a glass, it hums. And if you can get a speaker and put it next to the sound or the glass, and it plays that exact same note, then all of the energy from the speaker goes into the glass. The molecules start to vibrate because they don't know what to do with the energy, and eventually they smash. But when we demonstrated it here in the science gallery a little while ago, you can actually see the glass is plastic. It bends long before it smashes, which is incredible. Glass is an amazing material. Is it liquid? Is it solid? Depends if you ask a chemist or a physicist.
Give us an idea of what you'd like to put up on the DART trains that are messages about physics.
Well, it's not just my ideas. What we're doing is we're going to get like all of the physicists in Trinity to pitch in their ideas, and it'll be based on what they teach, what they as undergrads learn, and on what we research. And that's the crucial thing. It's the whole family. It's not just the doddery old professor who sits there musing about things. No offense, Luke. You're not old.
not going to win now.
But examples are, like Joe said, we're all made of stars. Things like you take the dart to work, you arrive younger than if you walk. We've so many of them. But the main thing is, what we want to get is the wowness. I want to show that physics is beautiful, that it's creative, it's not iterative, it's not boring. It is for you. I think too many people see physics as ugly but necessary and not for them, and I want to change that.
Even better saying the weirdness.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredible, yeah.
Has the principle that you were demonstrating there actually been captured in instruments for measuring blood flow or whatever else the applications are?
Yes, they have. Now, I don't know how exactly they work, but they're based on the Doppler effect.
Okay.
So they're able to monitor the flow of blood through, for instance, the heart, and it can tell if you have a weaker valve on one side or the other.
Thanks, Shane. Well done.
Thank you.
I think I detected a slight hue of red on Shane's face there for a second. Elaine Doyle is passionate about sustainable development. She holds a Bachelor of Engineering in Manufacturing Engineering from University of Limerick and has a Masters of Science in Sustainable Development from DIT. She has worked in the waste management and wind farm planning sector as an engineer. Someone has to do it. And she recently set up an environmental education company called Bolts. Elaine is one of the Change Nation's change executives for transition towns and is on the committee of the charity Engineers Without Borders Ireland. So it's amazing that she has time to do this. She believes sustainability, engineering and science communication can empower people to make the changes needed for a better world. So a bit of an optimist then. Put your hands together for Elaine, please. Good luck.
I've got a little story for you. Once upon a time, long, long ago and far, far away. Okay, I'll make it more specific because you're adults. In the year 1870, in the Amazon basin in Peru, we find a young soil scientist named James Orton. And James noticed that the soil in the area was very dark, had an awful lot of carbon, and was really, really fertile. And this wasn't only interesting to James, this soil actually had a nickname locally. It was called Terra Preta de Indian, meaning the dark soil of the Indians. So to find out more, James used time travel. Well, actually, what we call it in the business is just reverse engineering, but it doesn't sound as interesting. So he found out that as far back as 500 AD, Amazonian Indians used to bury their waste cooking and charred waste products into the soil. Excuse me. And we don't know if they actually did this just to dispose of waste, or if they knew of the really, really strong connections between charcoal and soil fertility. In modern times, for a scientist to recreate terra preta, they've come up with a product called biochar. Biochar is manufactured from waste biodegradable materials. When cooked in a very low oxygen environment, makes a charcoal-like product. I have some here. It's not overly interesting looking, it just looks like charcoal. But biochar has two major properties as a soil amender and a carbon mitigator. The raw material that goes into that biochar is waste biodegradable material, such as waste wood. When a tree is growing, it breathes in carbon dioxide, cleaning up the air. But as that tree dies and rots, it releases that carbon dioxide back into the air, where it contributes towards climate change. However, during the manufacture of biochar, that carbon is locked in indefinitely into the biochar, making biochar carbon negative. And it makes sure that that carbon dioxide doesn't go into the air where it's not needed, but it actually goes into soil where it is needed. Biochar is a very strong soil amender. When biochar is placed in soil, it acts like a sponge, bringing in nutrients, microorganisms, and water. It increases the property of the soil, but also any plants that are grown in that biochar-enriched soil have increased yield. In Kenya, studies have found a 200% increase in the yield of crops. This is absolutely immense for food insecurity and how we are going to feed the 9 billion people we're going to have on this planet. In our world, we have an awful lot of problems, and we tend to look to the high-tech, futuristic ways of solving them. But I think if we just take a step back, look at what's been done, look at things like biochar. It can help in the fight against two of the biggest problems facing the world this very second: soil degradation and climate change. And if we use such products as biochar, we can make the world a little bit of a better place, and maybe, just maybe, we can all live happily ever after.
Well done, Lane. Who was it? Luke.
Very nice. I noticed you began telling a story, didn't you?
Yes.
On purpose, obviously.
On purpose, yes.
Is that an important thing to do, do you think? Or
I do like it that way, and especially because of the product I'm talking about, biochar, was created over 2,000 years ago, and it's still relevant today, but I do like things in a story context, and I run an environmental education company, so I've written a kids book on climate change, so I do like the whole aspect of storytelling.
yeah, because obviously it can be quite complex, can't it? And you moved into your more hardcore science in the second half and made it relevant through the story. That was very impressive, I thought, the way to do it.
And I think that's needed because obviously it's not just a story. This is real life and this is real science and this is a real product. But it's just if we can relate it to everyday life and to stories, it makes everything a little bit more interesting.
Exactly. And would you be passionate about other aspects of science? Because obviously your passion for sustainable development shone through here tonight, but would you say you're also passionate about science in general, or science communication in general?
I've always
or
been
are you on a mission to do with sustainable development?
A bit on a mission, and obviously, as Jonathan said, a bit of an optimist. But I'm interested in learning in general, and I'm a manufacturing engineer by trade, so I just like to know how things work. So anything in science and engineering I find really, really interesting, especially if it's to do with natural science.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Well done, Lee. Okay, we're coming to the home stretch now. Chris Murray is a researcher in residence with Intel Ireland, based in Cran, Dublin, so he didn't have far to go, but just in this building here. In this role, he works alongside principal investigators on nanotechnology projects directly relevant to Intel. During his career, he's carried out science and technology projects in France, Germany, Japan, and the US. Still, he apparently won't work in a country unless it took part in World War II. He graduated with a Master of Science in Physics from Trinity College. He is married with 2 kids and is wearing a fantastic shirt. Welcome to the show.
I'm going to take you on a journey back in time. And as we venture back through the years, we're going to start to lose some familiar things. Are you with me? Let's go. The first thing we're going to lose are smartphones, and then iPads, and then social networks. Sorry, Facebook fans. Next thing to go will be downloading and MP3 players, then digital cameras, DVDs, mobile phones, the internet, CDs, home computers, and finally, bank machines. And there we're going to stop. Now, I want you to try and guess which decade we've arrived back in. I'll give you a hint. It's not the Dark Ages. It is, in fact, the 1970s. None of the things I just mentioned existed or were available back in the 1970s. So what has enabled all that great technology? Well, this has. The silicon chip. It's packed with transistors, tiny electrical switches, which are the brains behind modern electronics. Now, back in 1974, when the first microprocessors came on the market, there were about 4,500 transistors on these chips. Today, we can squeeze in about 1.5 billion through miniaturization, making things smaller. You see, over the last 40 years or so, we've been on an incredible ride down into the infinitesimally small, at a rate governed by Moore's law, which says that we should we should fit twice as many transistors on these chips every 2 years. And that's exactly what's happened. And it's that simple idea has delivered us the modern technological era. In fact, hundreds of times more transistors are now produced each year in the world than grains of rice. Great. So we can keep shrinking things forever, right? Wrong. As we continue to shrink into the nano world, soon we'll be faced with building devices out of just handfuls of atoms and molecules. We'll also run into quantum mechanical problems, which means that ultra-small devices will be more difficult to control. And this is scheduled to happen not in 40 years, not in 20, but in the next 10 years. And while there are plenty of ideas about what might replace the good old-fashioned transistor, no one's quite sure which one will work best or how we can make them. So, is this the end of technological progress? Of course not. It's not the first time that insurmountable problems will be overcome. There are plenty of people all over the world, and in this very building, myself included, who are working on new materials, devices, and concepts, which will allow us to take this great next step forward into the future. And the only certainty is that no one knows what this future looks like. And that surely is the beauty of science. Thank you.
Very good, Chris. Judith.
Yeah, Chris, very interesting. Some scary thoughts there, to be honest. I think back in the 1970s, none of our absolutely essential things existed as such. But I have a couple of questions. And we were happy. Exactly.
What
As
did
I was
we
sitting
do?
there, I was
What did
thinking,
we all
you know,
do?
is it for the better or for the worse? But the question I have for you is, you know, you're working in Cran at the moment, and you've, you know, it's connected to Intel as such, and so you're very au fait with industry-related research. Do you think that research is too focused on the application that it could have, or do you think that, what's your view on current research in Ireland at the moment?
Oh, well, that's a very interesting policy debate that you can really kick off. And depending on which side of the fence you sit on, you know, you can be pro or con. Now, from our perspective, and putting on my industry hat, yeah, it's great that all research should have some economic impact. But if you say that to an academic, they go ballistic, right? Because blue skies research is just as important, and that's absolutely true. Now, Intel doesn't carry out much of its own research. We buddy up with universities and academics all over the world, and they're the guys with the great ideas. And the next transistor might come out of nowhere, might come out of blue skies research. So it's absolutely necessary that we do not just the applied economic benefit for Ireland, etc., which is all great, but also some blue skies research too.
No, I agree on that. And what I would say is that, I mean, you're clearly passionate about science. You know, it comes across very much so today. And I'm conscious of, you know, our young population and
Yes.
what they're studying now. Like the jobs of the future don't exist right now. You know, in 10 years' time, we're going to be looking for vertical gardeners, space pilots. You know, things are continuing. Genetic counselors. This is the way the world is going. This is the reality. So, what advice would you give someone who's starting out, who's curious about getting into science, and your view on a career in science?
Well, follow what you love. Rule number one, do what you love. And if what you love is science, then absolutely do science. Now, I'm talking to the parents here. A lot of parents are worried about putting their kids into science because back in the old days, there were, you know, what's science? It should be in construction or law or something like that. There are jobs in science. I happen to work for a company that employs a lot of people. That is a nanotechnology company. And hopefully those jobs will continue to develop, you know, within our company and other companies in Ireland. So you can sleep peacefully in your beds tonight knowing that if you go to college, if you study science, if you do further degrees, you get your PhD, there will be jobs, even in this country, for you at the end of all that slog.
I agree. Excellent. Thank you very much for that.
I think Luke would have stricken you off if you hadn't mentioned blue sky research, Chris. What is vertical gardening, Judith?
As the world runs out of space, people plant gardens on the side of buildings.
It's fairly obvious, actually, now when you think about it. Our... No.
You're a horizontal gardener, right?
No, well, I've got a slope in my back garden. Lydia Flynn is our penultimate entrant. She's the slacker of the group. She's not even working right now. She's deferring her final year of studies in neuroscience and is instead busying herself with traveling around the world, swing dancing, and Coursera. She was awarded the Trinity Scholarship in May 2012 and does her own YouTube biology tutorial videos, which I spent a large amount of time watching last night. Lydia Flynn, everyone.
Thalidomide makes people stare. Thalidomide makes people care. It stops me from plaiting my own hair. It even rules the clothes I wear. That's a poem written by a 13-year-old girl born with the effects of thalidomide, a drug that was introduced over 50 years ago and caused severe bodily defects. The history of thalidomide reveals how deeply destructive systematic negligence can be. And there are so many if-onlys. I'm going to tell you about an if-only now, something that you can understand just by using your eyes. Here's an object, here's its reflection. The object is identical to its reflection. Here's another object. Here's its reflection. The object is not identical to its reflection. This phenomenon is called chirality, the Greek for handedness, the nature of handedness, and it occurs at a molecular level. These two hypothetical molecules are made up of the same thing. They have 2 blacks, 2 greens, 2 oranges, 2 blues, and 2 reds. They also have the same connections. The black is in the middle, connected to all of them, all of the other colors. They're also mirror images of each other, but they're still not identical. Thalidomide is a molecule like these. It exists in 2 versions. And it was said that if only we had administered one version of the drug, then the whole catastrophe could have been avoided. Let's see if that was so. But first we need to understand how shape influences whether something reacts with something else. These 2 molecules have different shapes. To understand how shape influences reactivity, consider this glove. This glove fits much better on my left hand than it does on my right hand. And you can imagine if these were 2 molecules reacting, you might have a successful reaction here, but an unsuccessful reaction here because the shapes don't fit. But consider this glove. This glove fits equally well on my left hand as it does on my right hand. And therefore, molecules may differ in shape and sometimes have differences in their reactions with other molecules, such as was the case with that glove. But sometimes, such as was the case with that glove, but sometimes it doesn't matter. And thalidomide was like this glove and these hands. The history of thalidomide is littered with almost wishful laments, beginning with "if only." But the thalidomide happened because of systematic negligence. As scientists, as an informed public, we must instead focus our attentions on questions beginning with "what if?"
Sorry for calling you a slacker, Lydia. Our judge, it's Brian, is it?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
That's very brave. Most people played for laughs. You went for pathos, and that was remarkable effect, I think, in the audience. What's your connection with the thalidomide story that you chose that?
I like making biology tutorial videos, as was mentioned. And normally when I start studying, I am extremely meticulous, and if I don't understand one sentence, I go back to the sentence before. And then I ended up with amino acids. And amino acids are like these molecules here. They exist in 2 versions, but our bodies only use one version. And I didn't quite understand chirality completely. And then I just started making videos about chirality, and I started really thinking about how best to explain the concept. And then I was under the impression that thalidomide was then I believed what I told you was not true. If we'd only administered one drug, then the whole thing could have been avoided. But that wasn't so.
So you started with the chemistry rather than with the thalidomide as the illustration.
Exactly, yeah. And then when I read about it, I was so shocked. I was like, God, the whole catastrophe could have been avoided. And then I was even more shocked to just believe it out of hand, that I was so frustrated that I just believed it out of hand. And then when I was researching it this week, it's still being said, and I found in university lectures that still have this example in their notes. And in some journals, it was just referenced offhand, without references. It was just kind of
So it's not true,
said.
Lydia, is that right? It's a funny misconception, isn't it? Because people do think it was a nice summer thing, but it wasn't. Is that right?
No, yes. Yeah. And I'd like to explain. I'd like to explain a little bit about that. I told you how the shape of the molecule influences the reactivity. And I just want to say one more thing. So many things went wrong in the thalidomide tragedy, and the reason why I feel so strongly about this is because at the time, a congressman in the USA said, "Oh, if only it was tested in rabbits, we would have avoided the whole thing." But the molecule actually doesn't go through the placenta in rabbits. It only goes through the placenta in primates. And I don't know if that was exactly relevant. But what I also want to say is that we think of drugs, most drugs, as just they go into the body and it's the drug that does all the action. But actually, in many cases, when we intake drugs, our liver metabolizes them, i.e. it changes them in some way. And sometimes it's not actually the drug that does the action, it's what happens after the liver has done something to it. It's like a few stages down the road. So sometimes, that's actually another layer of the case with thalidomide, that this would have happened. And also, another thing with these molecules is that sometimes they just, I don't know how to say, I think it's sufficient to say that they can interconvert with help.
That's
Read
mysterious,
more.
isn't it?
See my videos.
I think we better leave it there. Thank you very much.
Well done. Okay, so we're there. This is our last speaker, Fergus McAuliffe, graduated from UCC with a degree in environmental science before starting his PhD there. His research is on the use of willow trees as a sustainable means for wastewater treatment, which I think got a bit of press in the past few weeks. During the summer, he can be found in the middle of the willow wetlands. And during the winter, he can be found in the lab. Outside of these times, he says he can be found playing frisbee and being tall. Put your hands together for Fergus McAuliffe, please.
How clear is the line between life and death? Each of us in this room have something in common. We all have a beating heart, and it's what keeps us alive. If your heart stopped beating, that would be cardiac arrest, leading ultimately to death. But what if you didn't need a beating heart to be alive? To answer this question, we must go on a journey, all the way to the forests of northern Canada. Now, this isn't a story of fantasy or fairy tale, but it does, however, involve a frog. The wood frog. And this wood frog is blurring the line between life and death. Unlike us, frogs are cold-blooded. This means that their body temperature closely follows that of their environment. Now, seeing as the wood frog lives in such a cold environment, this poses a problem. As the temperature drops during the winter, the wood frog needs to develop a solution to live with the cold, and it has developed a remarkable solution. Like Bear Grylls, the wood frog is tough, but unlike Bear Grylls, the wood frog is tough in real life. As the temperature drops below zero, something remarkable happens. The frog begins to freeze. First its legs freeze, then its head and its chest freezes, until finally its heart freezes. No heartbeat, no pulse, it's in cardiac arrest. And it stays in this death-like state for weeks. Now, during these weeks, it's just like an ice cube. If you drop it on the ground, it clinks all over the place. In fact, they're so cold that they wouldn't even respond to the kiss of a princess. But during the spring, something remarkable happens. The frog begins to thaw. Its heart starts to beat again, its lungs start to breathe again, and in a matter of hours, it is hopping around the place. But how can the frog do this? And why can't we survive freezing and thawing? Well, as our cells start to freeze, they dehydrate. This means that water is sucked out of our human cells, and it freezes in the area around the cells. But when there's no water left in the cells, they collapse, split, and die, and they can never regain their function. But the wood frog is different. It has developed a safety mechanism. As its cells begin to freeze, some water is taken out, but it is replaced with glucose, which is a simple sugar that the frog makes inside its system. And this glucose keeps the inside of the cell unfrozen and acts just like a natural, sugary antifreeze. So clearly this frog won't be giving up sweets for Lent. And this freeze-thaw adaptation allows the frog to live, not by avoiding the cold, but by embracing it. And it challenges our understanding of what it means to be alive, the beating heart. And that is how the wood frog is blurring the line between life and death, not by freezing to death, but by freezing to live. Thank you.
You can't beat the deadbeat, the deadpan delivery of humour. Love it. Luke.
Very good, Fergus. I mean, did you spend much time working on those lines? Because there's some great ones there, I have to say. The princess kissing the frog and Bear Grylls, who's dead, of course. No, he's not. The other guy. What was the guy called? I got the skate thing.
Steve
That's
Irwin.
the guy. I'll mix them up. But did you spend much time on the lines? You must have worked on them.
Well, this isn't actually my own research. My own research is on wastewater treatment. So I said I'd give myself a break from my own PhD research, and I took a few days to put this together to learn as much as I could about it.
Sure.
And put together those we So.
Well, they're great lines. We found them very entertaining, and I have a joke for you though.
Okay.
We haven't got time, Luke. Sorry.
A quick one. How do you sell a frog to a deaf man? Do you want to buy a frog? Did you get it? See, you can't read jokes. You know, My other thing was, you don't live in Middle Earth as well, by any chance, do you? These willow wetlands sound like wonderful places, are they, to work and live in?
Yeah. So my own PhD research is about using willow trees, which are really fast-growing trees, and the strange thing is, I suppose, is the more wastewater you give them, the better they grow, and the worst quality wastewater you give them, the better they grow. Right. So I like to call that the Jedward effect, because in a similar way, the worse Jedward become at singing, the better it is for the record sales, and the bigger they become. It's the same for the trees. And these trees can grow they can grow remarkably high, so they can grow up to 4 meters in 1 year. So that's roughly the same height as 2 Paula Collins or about 10 Michael D. Higgins. Right. Just to give you some perspective.
and again, you clearly have a passion for this topic, but does that extend to all science, or are you a zealot
for
environmental sciences?
No, I really like all science, and I suppose the thing I like about communicating science in a situation like this is that you can be subjective and passionate about it. So, like, when you go to an academic conference, you have to say what you did, exactly how you did it, and you have to leave other people decide if it was good enough. But in a situation like this, if you believe in something, then you can get that across, and you can play to people's feelings and really make them feel passionate about the science that you're doing every day. So.
Sure. Great. Thanks very much.
That was great, well done. Okay, that is us. That's 10 contestants. You all have a sheet in front of you. You can make your own decisions on who you think should win FameLab, but we will let our judges retire and deliberate amongst themselves. Before we do that, Luke O'Neill will be giving us a short stand-up comedy sketch. No, he won't.
I didn't have a sign for that joke.
Yeah. Right. We'll let the judges go off for about 10, 15 minutes or so, or however long it takes them. And in the meantime, please put your hands together for Matt Smith. He's going to do a short stand-up set for us.
Not a chance. Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Smith. I'd firstly like to say a massive thank you to Jonathan and Lara. Lara's the producer of Future Proof with Jonathan, and an amazing show that themselves and Michael have put together. So a big round of applause for them as well. I suppose I'll start with Lara, because Lara is the person I know, and Lara has a PhD in immunology. I'd like to preface this with this. And I'm a family friend of the Dungans, and they have a dog called Sparky. And Sparky's a gorgeous dog, but it's got a few traits when it was knocking around, which was that it was deaf, dumb, blind, and had a limp. And she used to tell this adoring story about, every few days Sparky would, leave the house and amble down to the vet's, and then, the vet would call us and be like, guess who's here again? It's Sparky. And have to drive down and get Sparky. If your dog is bringing itself to the vet, it's probably quite ill. But I also thought maybe when I came here, I'd respond a lot to the presentations that the guys were doing, but they were all just so good and so entertaining, and used so many big words that I'm absolutely not going to touch them at all. But I learned all I knew about science through the way most of you guys probably did as well, which was through watching Jurassic Park growing up, which I think was pretty much the entire premise for all the scientific knowledge I have. I remember watching Jurassic Park when I was younger with my dad, and we had watched the whole thing, and this was the whole plot of cloning dinosaurs and then being unleashed in the park, and there was a bit at the end when the velociraptors went to pull the door handle and open the door, and it was at that point that my dad turned to me and said, "This is a bit far-fetched, isn't it?" So we kind of crushed my hopes of being a scientist at that point. And also, I knew I was never going to be a scientist because I was absolutely atrocious with fractions, a pretty basic maths level. And this comes from the fact that I'm an only child. I have no brothers and sisters. Because when I first went to primary school, I had never heard of a fraction before. There had never been a cause to have something. It's like, what do you mean, a third of a cake or a quarter of a paella, which for our non-Irish speakers in the room, of course, is the Irish for other pie. But there's other items. There's other things that like are consequences of being an only child, and that like I'm in no way competitive. The closest thing I came to like sport when I was younger was like falling out of a fridge, which I don't even know what that means. But then he went and sent me to a school that was so unsporty. Our chant at rugby matches was, "We'll beat you in the leaving cert." So we never really, don't worry, we did. But then one thing is, a lot of only children can get quite. They can be quite socially awkward. Depression can be something quite common with only children. And I always found, it's quite a sensitive subject, unless, of course, you're the Trinity Students' Union. Because when I went here years ago, they once sent out an email about depression workshops around the time of Christmas when it's quite prevalent. And they finished the email with, sign up to these workshops. Please sign up early to avoid disappointment. Which I thought could have been better worded in parts. But there you are. So I was trying to think, Lara was like, maybe have a go at some science banter. She offered up the joke, two atoms walk into a bar. She's not yet given me the punchline, but I'm hoping someone will shout it out. I'm also quite bad at technology in that I find myself getting beaten by technology quite often. Like I remember I had to call up the revenue office once to clear up some things from my lucrative career of being a comedian. And they asked me for my pure SI number, and I started. It was an automatic response, I should add, and I started saying it. I was like 534V, and a voice just came back. No. Type it. I was like, clever automated response. But the closest thing I came to wanting to be a scientist was, and I realized this when I was listening to Rocco and Joe when they were doing their presentations, which both ended with, and of course, we are going to die because of this. When I read Bill Bryson's short history of nearly everything, or as I like to call it, 8 million ways you're probably going to die today, for anyone else that's read it. But the reason, that was the point when I really wanted to be a scientist. But another thing I remember it for is it was probably the best present I'd ever got from my parents. My parents are notoriously bad at buying gifts. Whether it's Christmas or birthdays, they're so bad. The most recent one was, because I don't bother giving a list anymore because it'll be ignored for Christmas, but my mum got me a DVD box set, which was entitled Hitler, Evil. Which is a question I really think was up for debate, really. But obviously, that thing I'd been talking about for ages. But the last time I was actually in the Science Gallery was about 2 years ago. I had a friend who was an actor, and he took a gig here as being Charles Darwin, where he had to dress in the funny costume, because that's seemingly how Charles Darwin dressed, with a giant beard and massive glasses, and people could come and meet him and talk to him about his book, and he didn't know much about the book, probably more about Cavan under-21's football team than he did the book, but he was walking out on lunch one day through Stephen's Green, and two good-for-nothings walked by him, and one of them shouted at him, "Dickhead!" And his friend actually stopped him and said, No, he's not a dickhead. He's just a friend we haven't met yet. Which is one of the loveliest things I've ever heard from good-for-nothings. But we like to call that the summer of silly jobs, because we were flatmates at the time, and I was And I was doing an equally silly job in which I was dressed as a Shakespearean town crier for the Shakespeare Festival. And I'd like to add on ladies, but it was a disaster job. And I remember at one point on lunch trying to cross the road in Dame Street in my full Elizabethan Victorian garb, whatever it was, and getting two very different epochs there, and getting stuck in traffic crossing the road. So I was in my costume trying to get between cars that were beeping me, and to anyone looking on, it must have just looked like a man had been propelled 400 years into the future. I was like, what are these metal dinosaurs? Because obviously they had dinosaurs in the Elizabethan era. Little known fact. So obviously, I mentioned I went to Trinity. And I studied economics and politics, which is very weird for me. I didn't really enjoy politics that much. I found it difficult to get through a lecture without laughing at words like political mandate, and then which is still makes me giggle. Especially when I say Brian Cowan's mandate. That's just gross. And then I studied economics, and it was weird being in a class full of people who studied economics because they're the most driven people in the world. Do we have any economists in the room? Good. Are there many non-scientists in the room? Oh, you all put up your hands. It's like being back at school instead of shouting. Do we have any spies in the room? We have one person that's not a spy in this room that could. But I went to Trinity, and all these driven people who, would measure success in life as how much money they would earn, how big their house would be, how good looking their spouse would be. I was going to say sibling there, that would be disgusting. But I always thought that I could only ever measure success by have been followed all the time by a pride of lions, because a successful man has just walked into the room if he is accompanied by a pride of lions. If you can imagine that Ballygown ad from years ago where a woman's in a lift and a guy gets on with a bottle of Ballygown and she's very impressed. And then on the next floor, a guy gets on with a bigger bottle of Ballygown and she's quickly forgotten the first guy and she's moved over to this guy. Now the third guy gets on with a giant water container of Ballygown and they're happily ever after. In my ad, the fourth guy gets on with a pride of lions. And we all know who's going to win that. If you can imagine the boardroom where, someone's trying to talk to me, they're like, well, sir, revenue's down in the third quarter of the year, we're really sorry. And you say, get him, Mufasa! And they all jump on him because you can't just call one of them Mufasa. But I suppose I'll finish with one thing I wanted to do in college with my degree. I spent most of my time studying other subjects, and one of them would have been psychology, which I suppose is the closest thing to a science I got. I could be grossly incorrect with that, because I have a kind of ridiculous and pathetic phobia, which is of birds. And this came from when I was, that's chickens and winged things, not the other one. But I used to do sets on this where I would ask people if anyone had any phobias. Does anyone have any phobias in the audience? I'm a complete loser for my one, so yours can only be better. There were people who there's a guy who was afraid of whales, the giant mammal, not the country, which would be understandable, but the reason he gave was I was like, well, why are you afraid of whales? We're in Ireland, there's not many of them knocking about, you're probably safe. And he said, oh, because their arteries are so big you could swim in them. And I'd love to think that if that came up ever, that I'd be given the choice of doing it or not. And another guy was afraid of seaweed, I asked, why seaweed? And he said, oh, well, because there could be sharks behind it. To which my rebuttal was, well, surely you have a phobia of sharks. He said, no, seaweed. It's definitely seaweed. I was like, okay, well, let's imagine a scenario where, there's a bathtub or a basin full of seaweed. Are you afraid of the fact that there might be sharks behind it then? And he's like, well, there's less of a chance, yeah, but I'm still... But my phobia came about when I was 3.5 years old, and my uncle had this big chicken farm. A small chicken farm at the time, and it was in this tiny little chicken coop, and I was in bedding the hens, which is putting them to sleep, not making them listen to smooth jazz. And my uncle slammed the door shut, and because it was in the pitch dark and they weren't used to being with a warm, large object in the coop, they went bananas. They thought it was a fox. So I was like banging, making incoherent noises with my hilarious lisp at the time. And my uncle eventually let me out. So now I have this phobia of chickens, and to a greater extent, my uncle. So I decided to go and try and do a bit of research on how to beat this phobia. And there's loads of really awful ways. And the best one I found is this one here. Which is this? Yeah, so this was an article on like a self-help, how to do it yourself, if you're an idiot. They didn't say that, but so this is the article. As with other phobias, it is important to establish what exactly triggers the feelings of fear. For me, it would be that they might eat you. And this was for pigeons. So with birds, it may be fluttering wings, the way they move, the way pigeons in particular walk fearlessly towards people, hoping for food. Not dispelling my initial fear. It may be the texture of the feathers or the fear of disease or indeed a combination of these. Blah, 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 blah. A gradual series of self-exposure steps can be put together, like this one, for someone, not that self-exposure, not going around flashing pigeons, for someone with severe pigeon phobia. So step 1, draw a small rough pigeon shape on a piece of paper. My initial thing was surely you would draw a gentle pigeon shape on a piece of paper, but however, there are bigger problems with this. Step 2, work up to the biggest and most accurate version you can manage, which is my worst fantasy nightmare. Like, paint me like you do your other French birds. Step 3, look at black and white photos of pigeons. Okay. Step 4, look at color photos. Step 5, look at videos. Step 6, look at pigeons through a closed window. If they do not, then in brackets, if they do not come into your garden, or if you do not have a garden, what a dig! I've got enough problems with you pointing out that I have a back garden. Get someone to drive you to a place where they might congregate. Get someone to drive you to a place, because you might need a driver. That's terrifying. It's like the movie Drive, except with more senseless violence. Then step 7, partly open the window and watch them, and then open the window a bit more. And then the penultimate one, look at them through an open doorway. And then the final one, this is the final step. Move further out from the door, then further, etc. Now, I would have thought that was the crux of the problem. It's like, oh, then, it'll be grand. Like, imagine if you got a book on, like, surgery, and it was, just clean your utensils like your knife and your spatula. You wouldn't use the spatula in surgery. Your utensils, put on your gloves, step over the body, and anyway, thank you. You've all been absolutely wonderful. Enjoy the rest of...
That was brilliant. Yeah, so I met with Liz McBain from British Council, and she said, what are we going to do about the interval? And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. We'll sort it, it's grand. And she said this on Monday. She said, it's the 10th. And I was like, oh yeah, 10th. And then I realized, oh, that's 2 days from now. So I kind of got a little bit freaked out. And I rang Lara, who produces Future Proof, and said, what are we going to do? We're going to do it for the interval. And she said, oh, I got a mate of mine. He's a comedian. And I was like, oh, great. But actually, wasn't he brilliant? Matt Smith, everyone. Has everybody given up their sheets? Yeah, everyone's given up their sheets. You've all made your vote. Anybody not made their vote? Anybody still have a page? Okay, we've got sort of a gap. Yeah, we could dance. Actually, I do a talk show called The Spin. And by happy coincidence, we actually had a phobia discussion today, talking to people about phobia. And the thing you said about shark behind seaweed, we had a caller on who said, I have this phobia where I'm afraid of sharks getting into the pool via a hidden trapdoor. No, that's not weird. What was weird is, 3 minutes later, we got another caller on and said, yeah, I have the exact same thing too. I didn't realize it was a thing. And actually, it is a thing. Christina Ricci, or Ricci, or however you pronounce her, she actually has the same phobia. The fear of a shark getting into a swimming pool via a trapdoor. We also spoke to a woman who had a fear of jam, which is interesting. But weirdly, when pressed, she did not have a fear of marmalade. And the funny thing about all these people is they have absolutely no idea where this phobia comes from. And you always think, like, there must be something. Like, maybe someone smashed you over the head with some marmalade. But everyone goes, no, I don't. Which is always great in the radio. So where did it come from? Where does this actual phobia come from? Don't know. Okay. Right, so is everybody having a good time? No, just a brief word to say how amazing were our entrants. I did this last year, and a British Council brought over a bunch of people to kind of show off how amazing FameLab is, and we were all like, oh, it's brilliant. And I was very impressed. But I have to say, like, you know, we've done really, really well. And you know, this is the first time that we've done this, and the first time British Council said, we don't know, we're gonna go and we're gonna try and we're gonna see if it works, because it's quite a small market, Ireland. Great response from people, huge amount of enthusiasm, and everybody was just so great. You nailed your presentation, so well done. Just another round of applause for our entrants, please. Make it long. Look, screw it. While we're here, I do this program called Future Proof. It's a science program. It goes weekly, 6 p.m. on News Talk. And this week we're doing a rather special thing. Every once in a while we do these sort of sound design pieces where we spend a huge amount of time for a short piece of on-air radio. So this week we're doing a piece on Billy Cohn and Bud Fraser, who are two American doctors who are going about creating a heart that doesn't beat. It's an artificial heart. And so previously, through history, artificial hearts, they were pretty rubbish for the most part in the beginning. There's a guy called Barney Clark in 1972. He was attached to one of these machines, and it basically wheezed and it kept him alive for 112 days, and he regularly asked to be put to death. It wasn't a really good thing for him. But since then, we've got a massive movement on in the development of artificial hearts. And these guys are working with this amazing artificial heart that works differently. It doesn't beat because I think it's 35 million times a year your heart beats. And so any piece of machinery to actually propel your blood through your body that's man-made, you just can't do that because the machines don't like to do that. They just break and they fracture, and then that's not good when it's your heart. So these guys have developed sort of like an Archimedes screw way of getting blood around the body. So what they do is they get an electromagnetic thing, and they put it outside the body, and then they've got this sort of screw in the middle, just where your heart is, and it sort of whizzes along and kind of propels blood through your body. It's an absolutely fascinating thing. And the idea is that instead of beating, it just whirs, and so there's only one moving part. And so there's no parts to replace, because obviously with heart surgery, you don't want to go in there and like fiddle with things. Oh, we need to fix that. You can't do that with hearts. So they're going to be telling the story of how they're doing it. They have a facility in Texas where they've got all these cows who are implanted with these fake hearts. And literally they cut out the hearts of these cows, and they are alive and have been living for years. But if you try and get an EEG off them, ECG? EEG? Always get confused with those. If you do that, or you actually get a pulse from them, you'll find that they don't have a pulse at all. It's a fascinating story, and we put a huge amount of work. We spoke to Billy Cohn and Bud Fraser, and it's on tonight, not tonight, Saturday at 6 p.m. on Future Proof. Very fascinating story. Love you to listen and tell people about it. Right, I was just filling time, to be honest. No, I'll leave that to you, Luke.
Thanks.
Right, welcome back our judges, please. Okay, that's okay? Yeah, great, super. All right. Nervous? Right, we have our winners, and is Michael going? Who's going to announce the... Oh, I announced the winners. Okay, excellent. Okay, so Brian, you're going to give away the prizes?
Apparently so, yeah.
I was supposed to talk to us about this. Right. Okay, prize, the fourth prize, which is the audience prize, which is your selection of who you thought gave the best talk this evening, goes for, drum roll, please. You can use your feet. Fergus McAuliffe. Come on up. Well done.
Well done, well done.
Yeah, very good. Okay, the third prize, as chosen by our judges, is a €100 gift token. And it is for Elaine Doyle. Well done.
Well done, well done, well done.
Okay, getting close now. The second prize, the runner-up prize, which is a Kindle Fire HD.
Oh, sorry.
It's not used, I don't think. It looks like it's
upside down,
anyway. It goes to Shane Bergen. Well done. And the winner for tonight's FameLab Ireland, who will win an iPad Mini and then head off to Cheltenham to represent Ireland for the first time in the competition, and we wish them very well. It goes to show that last is by no means least. The audience agree with the judges. Fergus McAuliffe is the winner of FameLab Ireland. Well done.
Well done, Fergus. Well done. Very, very good. Very good.
Do you want to say a few words?
Don't do it again, please.
Thanks very much to everyone who came and listened to our talks. I hope that you leave tonight as excited as we did when we arrived here. I just want to say thanks to Liz especially for organising an absolutely fantastic weekend 2 weekends ago. I learned as much in those 2 days than I have in 3.5 years of studying willow trees. So it was absolutely great. Also thanks to Jonathan and thanks to our 3 judges. Thanks very much.
I'm sure you all wish Fergus well in representing Ireland for FameLab in a few weeks' time. Right, just to say a few thank yous. A huge thank you to CPL, to Science Gallery for hosting the event, to our esteemed judges, to Liz McBain from the British Council, Michael White from the British Council. Thanks so much for bringing the event to us. I think it was a huge success. It's good night for me. I hope you had a great evening and enjoy FameLab next year. Come again.